Don't scroll. Not because this is dramatic, not because of a warning, and not because you owe this video anything. Stop because something already happened in you the moment you saw these words. It was subtle, no rush of excitement, no spike of emotion, more like a quiet click, neutral, steady, almost ordinary, and if you're honest, you can feel it now. So do this with me for 10 seconds. Keep your eyes on the screen, but shift your attention inward. Notice your breath without changing it. Notice your jaw, your shoulders, the space behind your eyes. Are you tense, or is there a small softness, a slight reduction in internal noise? Don't chase a feeling, just observe what's there. That observation is the point. Most people live inside their reactions. They scroll because something pulls them. Curiosity, boredom, anxiety, the need to be entertained. But right now, you're doing something different. You're watching the pull instead of being pulled. That is not a mood. That's a recognition event. A threshold where awareness begins, noticing the mechanism of awareness. And before your mind tries to label this as spiritual or weird, let's keep it grounded. This isn't mysticism. It isn't emotional manipulation. It's cognition. Your brain runs predictive models all day long, constructing meaning before you even realize it. When attention becomes stable for a moment, the model becomes visible. You notice the difference between a thought and the one noticing the thought. That's the shift. Quiet, stable, clear. Here's why I'm asking you to stay for this single viewing window. Not because a message will disappear from the internet, not because you were chosen, but because your first contact with an idea is the moment your nervous system decides whether it matters. Novelty plus attention creates capture. Your brain either encodes the pattern as relevant or it tags it as noise and moves on. If you leave now, nothing bad happens, no curse, no cosmic consequence, but you will have confirmed the old loop. External stimulation wins, internal clarity gets skipped. If you stay, even for a few minutes, you give your system a new reference point. Calm can be more compelling than scrolling. Structure can be more satisfying than hype. So check again, right now. Do you feel slightly calmer than you did 10 seconds ago? Slightly clearer, not euphoric, just clean? If the answer is yes, that's your signal. And if the answer is no, notice that too. The noticing is still the threshold. In a minute, I'm going to explain what Sophia and Emerald are pointing to in plain psychological terms, without mythology. But first, let your system register this. You can be here without reaching. You can listen without hunting for a payoff. That's rare. That's the beginning of self-regulation becoming your default instead of stimulation. It's when the mind stops outsourcing meaning and quietly returns. This video isn't trying to convince you of anything. It's trying to help you witness what your mind usually hides behind motion. One view, one moment of stable attention. And once you see it, you don't see the feed the same way again. When I say emerald message, I'm not talking about a prophecy, a code from the universe, or some hidden frequency beamed into your phone. I'm describing an instruction your system can actually run, coherence, a simple alignment between where your attention is, how your nervous system is regulated, and how your mind constructs meaning. Emerald is just the label for that aligned state, stable, balanced, integrated, not fireworks, structure. Your brain is not a camera. It doesn't record reality and hand it to you raw. It predicts. Every second, it takes sensory input, compares it to memory, fills in gaps, and generates a model of what's happening. That model is useful. Without it, you couldn't move through a room or understand a sentence. But most people never notice they're living inside a model. They defend it as if it's reality itself. They argue from it, fear from it, crave validation for it. That's the default. The emerald message is the moment you catch the model being built, not as an idea you agree with, but as a perception you can feel. You notice thought as an event, not a command. You notice emotion as information, not identity. You notice interpretation forming, meaning assembling itself, before you're fully fused with it. That catching is coherence beginning. In psychology terms, this involves a shift in how you relate to narrative. The default mode network, often active during self-referential thinking, rumination, and identity maintenance, keeps stitching a story. Me, my past, my future, what people think, what I need to prove. That story isn't bad, it's just loud. When your attention stabilizes and your physiology calms, the grip of that narrative loosens. The story doesn't vanish, but it stops being your prison. You can watch it run. Now, why call it Sophia? Historically, Sophia is the symbol of wisdom, but we're not using her as a mystical character. We're using the name as a pointer. The moment wisdom stops being a concept and becomes an operating principle. Wisdom becomes structural when awareness recognizes its own interpretive machinery in real time. Not, I learned something. More like, I can see how learning happens. I can see how meaning is manufactured. That is Sophia recognition. Here's the architecture. Identity loops are patterns your brain repeats to maintain coherence. I'm the kind of person who, I always, I never. These loops are efficient, but they also trap you. They filter perception so you keep experiencing a world that confirms the loop. Predictive processing does the same. If your model expects threat, it highlights threat. If it expects rejection, it scans for rejection. Then you feel proved right, even though you were selecting evidence. Coherence is when that selection process becomes visible. Your attention stops being yanked by prediction and starts resting in observation. Physiologically, regulation increases. Breathing steadies, muscle tension reduces, heart rhythm becomes less chaotic. Cognitively, interpretation slows down just enough for you to see it. That's why this feels like clarity, not excitement, clarity. Your system isn't adding more information, it's reducing distortion. So the emerald message means this: stop outsourcing your reality to the loudest internal story. Let attention and regulation meet, and watch meaning form instead of being dragged by it. Once you see the model as a model, you gain a new freedom. You can still use it, but you're not owned by it. That's the difference between living inside your mind and living with your mind. And if you're waiting for something mystical to happen, visions, signs, dramatic certainty, you'll miss it. Because the real marker is quieter, less compulsion, less reactivity, more space before you respond. That space is not emptiness, it's capacity. It's where your life stops being a reflex and starts becoming a choice. If you want it even simpler, coherence has 3 parts. First, attention. What you're actually focusing on, not what you say you're focusing on. Second, regulation. Whether your body is in fight or flight or in a state that can accurately perceive. Third, meaning-making. The interpretation your mind rushes to attach. In incoherence, attention is scattered, the body is tense, and meaning becomes reactive. In coherence, attention is single-pointed, the body is steady, and meaning becomes examined. Try it now. Think of a recent message you received. Notice the instant story your mind wrote about it. Then notice the one who noticed. That second noticing is the emerald message in motion. That's not magic, it's metacognition, and it changes what you do next today. When I say expires immediately, I'm not talking about a file being removed from a server. I'm talking about how your mind handles first contact. The first pass through an idea is different from every pass after it, because novelty changes the way your brain listens. In the beginning, attention is sharp. The system is alert. Not in a stressed way, more like a camera finally coming into focus. And in that first moment of focus, your brain decides what gets encoded. This is why people can read something once and feel like it rearranged them, and then reread it later and feel almost nothing, not because the words changed, but because the mind changed its posture. The first time, it was discovery. The second time, the brain classifies it as known, and once something becomes known, the mind downgrades it to content. Familiarity turns the threshold into information, and information is easy to scroll past. That is the psychological expiration. It's not dramatic, but it's real. Your system either captures this as a reference point, or it tags it as entertainment and moves on. And if you're someone who has consumed a lot of self-help, a lot of consciousness content, a lot of explanations, you already know this pattern. The mind can binge insights the way it binges videos and still remain structurally unchanged, because the mind learned how to treat transformation like media. So the one view only window isn't a threat. It's a warning about your own processing. Right now, you are still in the capture phase. There's a softness in your attention that isn't fully defended yet. You haven't reduced this to an opinion. You haven't turned it into a label. You're still in the moment where your nervous system can register it as lived experience rather than mental decoration. Here's where the one-way door comes in. Once you see meaning construction happening, you can't truly unsee it. You can ignore it. You can distract yourself. You can drown it in stimulation. But something has already shifted. The mind has glimpsed its own machinery. That's irreversible. In the same way that learning a magic trick is irreversible, you can still enjoy the performance, but you'll always know there's a method behind it. The spell is broken, and that's not loss, it's sovereignty. But, and this matters, irreversible doesn't mean instantly embodied. The threshold crossing is a moment. Stabilization is a process. Think of it like an operating system update. The system has detected a new baseline is possible, but the installation isn't finished. During this early stage, the mind will try to do what it always does, pull you back into the old interface, back into reactivity, back into identity loops, back into the constant hunger for stimulation and certainty. This is why you may feel calm right now, but later feel the old noise creeping back. That doesn't mean you lost it. It means your brain is testing which pattern gets reinforced. It's running a comparison. Does the old loop still win because it's familiar, or does the new coherence win because you stayed with it long enough to make it useful? And here's the part most people misunderstand. The enemy isn't doubt. The enemy is automaticity. The way you lose coherence isn't through one big dramatic failure. It's through 1,000 small returns to unconscious habits. Checking your phone the moment discomfort appears, needing an argument to feel alive, needing constant input to avoid being alone with your own mind. Every time you do that, you're not just passing time, you're rehearsing a neural pathway. This is where deletion becomes internal. Your brain is not sentimental. It prunes what isn't reinforced. Anything you don't return to, anything you don't embody, gets treated as irrelevant. Not morally irrelevant, neurologically irrelevant. That's how neuroplasticity works. Pathways that fire together wire together, and pathways that don't get used weaken. Your mind will not preserve coherence just because it was beautiful. It will preserve coherence if it becomes functional. So yes, it expires, not because it disappears, but because your brain will overwrite it with the next thing you feed it. If the next hour is all dopamine spikes and fragmented attention, this moment gets drowned. If the next day is reactive conversations, endless scrolling, and identity defense, the model becomes thick again, and the recognition slips into the background. Notice how different this is from typical fear-based urgency. I'm not telling you to stay because you'll miss a miracle. I'm telling you to stay because you'll miss a reference point. And reference points are what calibrate perception. When your baseline is chaotic, chaos feels normal. When your baseline is coherent, chaos becomes visible as chaos. That visibility is the beginning of choice. So, let the cognitive dissonance resolve right now. If you expected hype and you're feeling calm instead, good. Calm is the signal that your system is integrating. Hype is easy. Hype doesn't require structural change. Calm does. Because calm asks you to remain present without needing a hit. And this is where we open the next loop, because this matters more than the explanation. The most important phase is stabilization, not understanding, not agreeing, stabilization. The part where you train the new baseline until it holds under pressure, because once it holds, you don't need reminders, you don't need signs, you don't need to chase content that promises a shift. You become the shift, quietly, steadily, and permanently. Now we get practical, because this is the part that turns a moment into a baseline. Understanding is easy. Stabilization is where the brain either upgrades or reverts. And the good news is, you don't need rituals, you don't need intensity, and you don't need to feel spiritual to do this. You need repetition in the right direction, especially in the next day or two, while the nervous system is still impressionable. Start with the simplest move, the pause. Not a dramatic meditation pause, just a half-second gap before you react. Before you reply to a message, before you open another app, before you speak when you feel the impulse to defend yourself, that gap is where coherence lives. In neuroscience terms, you're strengthening prefrontal regulation over limbic reflex. In human terms, you're taking your life back from autopilot. The old system is immediate. Stimulus becomes reaction. Reaction becomes identity. The new system inserts observation first. You'll notice something at the beginning. The pause feels almost uncomfortable, like you're resisting momentum. That's because you are. Your mind is used to movement as a way to avoid contact with itself. Scrolling, arguing, overthinking, these are all forms of motion that keep you from sitting in the raw simplicity of awareness. So don't judge the discomfort. Treat it like the feeling of a muscle you haven't used in years. It's not proof you're failing, it's proof you're training. Then come to thought itself. Not the content of your thoughts, but the fact that thoughts arrive. Watch one show up, maybe a doubt, maybe a plan, maybe a memory. Instead of following it, label it internally as an event. Thinking. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to replace it with positivity. You just stop granting it the authority of truth. This is the shift from identification to observation. And if you've never practiced it, you'll be surprised how quickly it changes your mood without you forcing anything. Now bring your breath into it, not as a spiritual technique, as a steering wheel for your nervous system. When you slow the exhale slightly, just slightly, you send a signal of safety to the body. Safety reduces internal noise. Noise reduction makes perception clearer. And clarity is what lets you see the model in real time. You don't need a special count. You just need a steady rhythm for 60 seconds a few times today, especially when you feel that familiar urge to chase stimulation. Next, reduce overstimulation on purpose. I'm not saying become a monk. I'm saying stop flooding the system while it's trying to stabilize. Right now your brain is deciding which baseline to keep. If you hit it with constant novelty, fast scrolling, loud videos, endless debates, you train fragmentation. Your attention becomes a scattered beam, and scattered attention can't hold coherence. So choose micro-boundaries, 1 hour without switching apps, a meal without a screen, a short walk without headphones, a morning without immediately consuming content, not as discipline, as protection. You're protecting the new operating system while it installs. Deliberate silence is part of this. Silence is where the old identity gets restless because it can't perform, it can't prove itself, compare itself, or distract itself. And that restlessness is exactly why silence works. When you sit in quiet for even 3 minutes and simply observe the urge to fill the space, you're exposing the seeking mechanism. You're seeing the engine that used to drive you without your consent. That exposure weakens it. Now let me normalize the wobble, because it will happen. You will have moments of clarity and then suddenly find yourself back in an old habit, scrolling, reacting, overanalyzing, almost like you woke up halfway through it. That is not a reset to zero. That is recalibration. The system is testing. Each time you catch yourself and return to observation without self-attack, you strengthen the new pathway. Self-attack reinforces the old identity loop. Calm correction reinforces coherence. Future pace this. Over the next 24 to 48 hours, you're going to be given multiple chances to choose. The choice won't feel dramatic. It will look like a small pause, a slower exhale, a decision not to feed the noise, a willingness to sit with discomfort without reaching for stimulation. These are the moments that encode the shift, not the big insights. And here's the identity change underneath all of this. You're not seeking anymore. Curiosity can remain, learning can remain, but the dependency can end. You're not outsourcing your stability to the next video, the next explanation, the next promise. You're building a baseline that holds even when life is messy. That's what coherence is for. Not to make you float above reality, but to make you steady inside it. Try it today in one real situation. The next time you feel the impulse to react quickly, pause, exhale, watch the thought, and choose the response you respect. That single moment is how the emerald message becomes yours, not as content you watched, but as a structure you live. Before you leave, don't rush back into the feed. Just pause and compare. A few minutes ago, you were in motion, maybe bored, maybe restless, maybe half aware. Now check again. What's different? Not in your life story, not in your circumstances, in your internal texture. Is there a little more space between thoughts? A little less urgency to chase something? Even if it's small, notice it. That's the marker. Not excitement, not certainty. Calm, clarity. The quiet sense that you don't need to grab the next thing immediately. If you felt that at any point in this video, even briefly, then the message landed. And the message, when you strip away every label, is simple. Meaning isn't found. Meaning is constructed, and now you can see the construction happening. That's what changes you. Not a new belief, not a new identity, just the ability to witness how your mind builds reality moment by moment. Once you can see the building, you stop being trapped inside the blueprint. You can still use thoughts, still feel emotions, still move through life, but you're no longer compelled in the same way. The feed becomes a choice, not a force. Now here's how you lock this in without turning it into a performance. If this helped you feel even slightly clearer, hit like, not as a ritual, but as a signal. A signal to the algorithm, yes, but also a signal to yourself. Grounded awareness matters more than noise. And if you want more content that stays in mechanism instead of mythology, subscribe. Not for hype, for reinforcement. And I want you to leave a comment, because this is bigger than one person watching in isolation. Tell me two things. First, did you feel calmer or clearer while listening? Even one word is enough. Second, where are you watching from? What city? What country? What corner of the world is receiving this right now? It might seem small, but it creates a map. A reminder that this isn't a private anomaly. Others are crossing the same threshold in their own way, in their own language, in their own lives. Read a few of the comments after you post yours, not to compare, but to recognize the pattern. Different stories, same shift. And then close the app for a minute. Take one slow exhale. Let this become your baseline, quietly, permanently.